Hello and welcome to quiz class. Today we have 100 questions on world history. Question 1. Which early 20th century art movement featured bright colors? Florism, Phantasm, or Fauvism? Fauvism. Who invented Fortran coding language in 1957? GE, Philco, or IBM? IBM. What was the Inovid contraceptive pill first marketed as a treatment for in 1957? Gynecological disorders, depression, or hypochondria? Gynecological disorders. What was the Murano lighthouse in Venice also known as? Fire of Venice, Dream of Venice, or Hope of Venice? Fire of Venice. What was the capital of Morocco, founded in 789, before Marrakesh? Tangier, Casablanca, or Fez? Fez. What was the first human virus to be isolated in 1927? Rabies, yellow fever, or hepatitis B? Yellow fever. Which song by Lloyd Price became the first rock and roll song to hit the Billboard Hot 100 in February 1959? Swagger Me, Shagger Tree, or Stagger Lee? Stagger Lee. Which country invented the gummy bear? Austria, Poland, or Germany? Germany. Which country was not a founding member of OPEC in 1960? Azerbaijan, Venezuela, or Kuwait? Kuwait. What was the first toy to be advertised on television in 1952? The Slinky, Barbie, or Mr. Potato Head? Mr. Potato Head. Where was the November 9th, 1989 press conference that led to the fall of the Berlin Wall? Ukraine, Russia, or East Germany? East Germany. What was the first book published by Jane Austen in 1811? Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, or Emma? Sense and Sensibility. What successful transplant in 1957 later earned Dr. E. Donald Thomas a Nobel Prize? Cornea, kidney, or bone marrow? Bone marrow. What is the name of the ship that rescued Titanic passengers hours after the ship went down in 1912? The Carpathia, the Lusitania, or the Olympia? The Carpathia. What year was the iPhone 4 released? 2009, 2010, or 2011? 2010. Which was the first country in the world to give all women and all men both the right to vote and the right to run for office in 1906? New Zealand, Finland, or England? Finland. Who was the Dolly the Sheep clone named after in 1996? Dorothy, the Wizard of Oz, Hello Dolly the Musical, or Dolly Parton? Dolly Parton. Who is the youngest ever winner of the Grammy Album of the Year? Olivia Rodrigo, Billie Eilish, or Taylor Swift? Billie Eilish. Which country was not a beginning inner six state in 1948? Spain, France, or Italy? Spain. Which country won the first Women's World Cup in 1991? England, the US, or Australia? The US. Which country's 1791 to 1804 revolution led it to become the first independent Black republic and abolisher of slavery? Haiti, Jamaica, or Belize? Haiti. Which 1997 Broadway show went on to supersede The Phantom of the Opera as the highest-grossing show of all time? The Lion King, Mamma Mia, or Wicked? The Lion King. Which empire created and used the secret weapon Greek fire from 672 AD? Kingdom of Axum, the Byzantine Empire, or Sasanian Empire? The Byzantine Empire. Which country experienced the Solidarity movement in 1980? Hungary, Poland, or the Czech Republic? Poland. Which entertainment company introduced streaming services in 2007? Apple, Amazon, or Netflix? Netflix. What 2007-2008 financial event caused widespread economic turmoil? Subprime Manhattan crisis, mortgage crisis, or money crisis? The subprime mortgage crisis. What treaty did not emerge from the two 19th century opium wars? Treaty of Nanking, Treaty of Sapa, or Treaty of Tientsin? Treaty of Sapa. Where was the 2010 Deepwater Horizon spill? The Gulf of Alaska, Gulf of Mexico, or Gulf of St. Lawrence? The Gulf of Mexico. Which street was focused on in the 2011 economic inequality protest movement? Bond Street, U Street, or Wall Street? Wall Street. Which country was Evo Morales a revolutionary leader of in the 1950s? Peru, Bolivia, or Chile? Bolivia. Which Bible was the first major book produced using movable type in the 1450s? Gothenburg, Gattenberg, or Gutenberg? Gutenberg. What significant treaty was signed in 2015 to combat climate change? The Glasgow Agreement, Paris Agreement, or Kyoto Agreement? Paris Agreement. Which country's 1960 independence marked the beginning of African decolonization? Chad, Ghana, or Kenya? Ghana. What artist was part of the 19th century arts and crafts movement? Claude Monet, Francisco Goya, or William Morris? William Morris. Where did corsair pirates operate between the 15th and 18th centuries? The Mediterranean Sea, Red Sea, or Baltic Sea? The Mediterranean Sea. Which U.S. Supreme Court case in 1857 ruled that African Americans could not be citizens? Dred Scott decision, Dred Scott decision, or Fred Scott decision? Dred Scott decision. Which 2011 operation addressed the Libya civil war? Intrepid Night, Vagabond Dusk, or Odyssey Dawn? Odyssey Dawn. Which 2017 international movement highlighted issues related to gender equality and violence against women? Us Too, They Too, or Me Too? Me Too. What is the full title of R.G. Collingwood's 1959 posthumous philosophy of history? The idea of time, history, or record? History. Which event in 2016 saw the UK vote to leave the European Union? Brexit, Megxit, or Makexit? Brexit. Which radiation belts were discovered in 1958 using data from the Explorer 1 and Explorer 3 satellites? Van Halen, Van Allen, or Van Dutch? Van Allen. How many commercial airplanes were hijacked in the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks? 4, 5, or 6? 4. Which country launched the Atlas missile, its first successful ICBM, in 1957? The US, the UK, or Russia? The US. What treaty, signed in 1815, ended the Napoleonic Wars and reshaped Europe? Congress of Milan, of Vienna, or of Munich? Congress of Vienna. Which saint, who would greatly influence Western Christianity, was born in 480 AD? Saint Francis, Saint Benedict, or Saint John Paul? Saint Benedict. Which Italian city is closest to the Pompeii site where Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD? Naples, Florence, or Bologna? Naples. Which 1986 summit marked a turning point in US-Soviet relations? The Saigon Summit, Lisbon Summit, or Reykjavik Summit? The Reykjavik Summit. What color is associated with the 1347 death pandemic that spread through Europe? Gray, yellow, or black? Black. Where was the 1943 Battle of El Alamein that marked the first major defeat of Nazi Germany in the North African campaign? Tunisia, Algeria, or Egypt? Egypt. Which 1979 conflict was marked by the USSR invading a neighboring country? Soviet Middle East War, Soviet Afghan War, or Soviet Pakistan War? The Soviet Afghan War. Which 1916 battle symbolized the horrors of trench warfare? The Battle of Verdun, Battle of Tannenberg, or Battle of Gallipoli? The Battle of Verdun. What proportion of the world's population was infected during the 1918 influenza pandemic? 1/5, 1/4, or 1/3? One-third. Which country hosted the first Winter Olympics in 1924? France, Austria, or Switzerland? France. In 1959, which Asian river experienced catastrophic flooding, resulting in one of the deadliest floods in recorded history? The Siam River, Ganges River, or Yangtze River? The Yangtze River. Which political assassination in 1881 led to the end of an era of reforms initiated by Alexander II? Alexander I, Alexander II, or Alexander III? Alexander II. Which U.S. ship sank in 1898, leading to the U.S. acquiring overseas territories? The Massachusetts, the USS Maine, or Portland? The USS Maine. How long did it take to build the Suez Canal before officially opening in 1869? 10 years, 20 years, or 30 years? 10 years. Which 1760s British act sparked protests over colonial taxation? Tact Act, Peg Act, or Stamp Act? Stamp Act. In 1865, which significant event ended the American Civil War? Lee's surrender at Amherst, Lee's surrender at Lynchburg, or at Appomattox? Lee's surrender at Appomattox. Which art biennial was first held in 1951? Mendoza, Cusco, or Sao Paulo? Sao Paulo Art Biennial. In 1605, which failed conspiracy aimed to blow up the English Parliament? Lightning Plot, Gunpowder Plot, or Westminster Plot? Gunpowder Plot. Where was the Mamluk Sultanate of 1261 to 1517? Cairo, Baghdad, or Damascus? Cairo. In 1453, which city's fall marked the end of the Byzantine Empire? Thebes, Babylon, or Constantinople? Constantinople. What was Chuck Yeager a pioneer of in the 1940s? Submersibles, automotives, or aviation? Aviation. What was the DMC DeLorean model that first appeared in 1981? The 12, the 13, or the 14? The DMC 12. Which U.S. volcano erupted in 1980, causing massive destruction and creating a new crater? Mount Rainier, Mount Okmok, or Mount St. Helens? Mount St. Helens. In 1066, which battle marked the beginning of Norman rule in England? The Battle of Hastings, the Battle of Guesclin, or the Battle of Wortling? The Battle of Hastings. In 1961, which fashion icon was featured on the cover of Vogue, solidifying her status as a global style influencer? Jackie Kennedy, Grace Kelly, or Queen Elizabeth II? Jackie Kennedy. In 1853, which event saw a fleet of U.S. warships under Commodore Perry force a country to open its ports to foreign trade? Opening of Japan, opening of China, or opening of Russia? Opening of Japan. What were European slaves sold into Africa between the 15th and 19th century called? White gold, white dust, or white man? White gold. What was the Kesem cave near Tel Aviv used for 300,000 years ago? Mining, artwork, or hearth? Hearth. Which country won the 1966 FIFA World Cup on home soil while hosting? Italy, France, or England? England. What science fiction concept did William Gibson invent in a 1957 short story? Dystopia, cyberpunk, or futurism? Cyberpunk. Which 1942 conference outlined the final solution, planning the genocide of the Jews during World War II? Wannsee Conference, a Warsaw Conference, or Wien Conference? Wannsee Conference. Which Japanese car manufacturer introduced a revolutionary rotary engine RX-7 sports car in 1978? Mazda, Toyota, or Suzuki? Mazda. In 1929, what did American business magnate Michael Cullen popularize? Mass farming, self-service shopping, or plastic packaging? Self-service shopping. Where was the 1991 Mount Pinatubo volcanic eruption that became the second largest of the 20th century and led to global temperature drops? The Philippines, Indonesia, or Papua New Guinea? The Philippines. In 1991, which desert marathon became known as the toughest foot race on Earth? The Marathon des Sables. Which brand introduced the first mass-marketed sanitary napkins in 1936? Tampax, Kotex, or Libra? Kotex. In which decade was Albania declared a monarchy? The 1900s, the 1910s, or the 1920s? The 1920s. Which 1879 war led to a famous last stand at Rorke's Drift? Franco-Zulu War, Hispano-Zulu War, or Anglo-Zulu War? The Anglo-Zulu War. Which naturalist published a joint paper with Alfred Russel Wallace in 1858 on the theory of natural selection? Gregor Mendel, Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, or Charles Darwin? Charles Darwin. Which Italian dam collapsed in 1963, causing massive landslides and flooding? Alpegara Dam, Place Moulin Dam, or Vaillant Dam? Vaillant Dam. In 1984, which French luxury brand introduced the signature handbag named after Jane Birkin? Louis Vuitton, Hermès, or Chanel? Hermès. In 1980, which song by Queen, featuring a distinctive bass line, became an anthem for sporting events worldwide? Another One Bites the Dust, We Are the Champions, or Don't Stop Me Now? Another One Bites the Dust. In 1948, which Middle Eastern airlift became the first large-scale UN humanitarian operation? Operation Genie Bottle, Operation Magic Carpet, or Operation Glass Slipper? Operation Magic Carpet. Which fitness craze swept through the US after being popularized by an Austrian bodybuilder in the film Pumping Iron? Weightlifting, judo, or aerobics? Weightlifting. What nationality was the explorer who mapped and named the massive Grand Canyon system in North America in 1872? Norwegian, Russian, or German? German. What did James Lovelock propose in the Gaia hypothesis in 1957? Extraterrestrial life, climate change, or Earth functions as a self-regulating system? Earth functions as a self-regulating system. Which novel by Chinua Achebe, published in 1958, became one of the most important works in African literature? Things Fall Apart, Things Fall Together, or Things Fall Inward? Things Fall Apart. In 1963, which Brazilian dance craze gained international popularity, influencing global music and dance culture? The bossa nova, copiera, or carimbo? The bossa nova. In 1985, which beverage brand introduced a controversial new formula leading to an infamous product retraction? New Coke, New Fanta, or New Mountain Dew? New Coke. What gas was released by Lake Nyos in 1986 that suffocated over 1,700 people and livestock in nearby villages? Sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, or nitrogen oxide? Carbon dioxide. Which film, directed by Sidney Lumet, was released in 1957 and is renowned for its depiction of the American judicial system? 12 Angry Men, 12 Angry Jurors, or 12 Angry Neighbors? 12 Angry Men. Which new empire was declared in 1871 in the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles? German, Polish, or Ukrainian? German. Which Diego Velázquez painting series inspired Pablo Picasso's series finished in 1956? Las Dormitorios, Las Meninas, or Las Peores? Las Meninas. In 1848, which political upheavals and revolutions spread across Europe? Springtime of Nations, Dawn of Nations, or Youth of Nations? Springtime of Nations. In 1955, what instant food was first introduced as a product by Nissin? Noodles, coffee, or mashed potatoes? Noodles. In 1973, which agreement ended U.S. involvement in Vietnam but failed to bring lasting peace? The Paris Peace Accords, the Zurich Peace Accords, or the Brussels Peace Accords? The Paris Peace Accords. Excuse me. And question 100. In 1938, which boxer won a historic rematch against a German opponent, becoming a symbol of resistance against Nazism? Sugar Ray Robinson, Sonny Liston, or Joe Louis? Joe Louis. And our bonus question, which film director piloted a submarine and visited a shipwreck for a record-breaking 1997 blockbuster? Let us know the answer in the comments. Thanks for playing this quiz. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. We will see you next time. Bye-bye.